Hello, and welcome to Borrow My Belief, a podcast that's designed to inspire you to live from your heart, to follow your truth, and do the unusual. And today I've got a guest who has inspired me within the property world. He's doing great things. And yeah, welcome, Doug. Welcome
Hi,
to the
hi,
podcast.
Joanne. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, I can see it looks like the sun's shining down your way as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is actually. What's it like in Scotland?
Eh, I had to close my blind here. It's so sunny. It's the day. It's the day.
I mean, for anybody who's listening, I used to live in Scotland, and I met you when I lived in Scotland, and I've moved to southern England, and it still rains, but I have to tell you, the weather is a lot better.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I know that as well. I lived in England, south of England for a long time as well. So yeah, even as a proud Scotsman, I would concede that the weather in the south of England is an awful lot better than it is in most parts of Scotland.
Doug, I met you through the property world, and I think I've been in that world a couple of years now, and the education that we met each other through has been a lot of fun. Um, and I mean, I don't know about you, I really enjoy entrepreneurship. I think it's the best self-help growth journey that I've ever done. So today I thought we'd talk about entrepreneurship and your journey into entrepreneurship. And I know you've got a really great story to tell and how your life went through twists and turns and brought you to the place you're at now. So
Absolutely.
you want to introduce yourself and then just speak, just get going. Let's see what
Yep.
happens.
Sure, sure. Well, my name's Doug, as we've already established, Doug Reid. I'm 65 years old. Was 65th birthday was just a few weeks ago, actually. And as you say, currently I'm in the world of property, but I didn't always start there. And I guess maybe it might help people just to understand a little bit about my background and how I got to what I'm doing now. So just the potted version because we would be here all day otherwise. I grew up in Edinburgh and started my career in Edinburgh. Moved to London in 1988. My background is oil and gas, big corporate environment. And I had a fantastic career in oil and gas, really enjoyed it. Finance was my discipline. I got to a reasonably decent level in the organization. But what was really neat about my working career was it gave me the chance, because it's an international business, oil and gas. So it gave me the chance to live and work in some real pretty cool places around the world. So I spent 15 years of my career working in places like Russia, Egypt, India, Italy. In fact, I was in Egypt twice, and finally in Trinidad and Tobago. So we had some fantastic times, both work-wise. The work was really good. I really enjoyed it. But as a family, we had some fantastic times. My kids in particular, I've got two kids. They had got some fantastic experiences and got to meet a lot of different people. Which I looking back on it, I appreciate that now more than I think I probably did at the time. So, we live in a world where there's a lot of intolerance to other religions, creeds, and so on. And you see that played out, every day in the news and so on. What I really loved about the opportunities my kids got is that they had friends. They went to school with kids who have different religions, different colors, and so on. And genuinely, they didn't see the difference between them. They didn't like some kids. That was fine because they didn't like them because they exhibited certain characteristics, but it wasn't because they were black or Muslim or anything like that. And they've taken that life view into their life as adults now, and I think that was a it was a people talk about unintended consequences. I guess that was an unintended consequence of the career that I had and the life that my kids had growing up, traveling around the world as we moved around it. So that was a bit of a philosophical point, wasn't it? Anyway, back to my back to my career. So I a couple of points on that one, I suppose. So I retired after 35 years. And like most people, I had great plans to travel and do all sorts of stuff in my retirement, which I did to a certain extent. But there was a sort of underlying theme of lack of fulfillment around that. I mean, there's only so much time you can go traveling in your in a year or so, and whilst I had other things that were keeping me occupied, I still had this kind of sense of lack of fulfillment. And it was that that really got me into property. I initially I bought my first property. It was a one-bedroom flat in Aberdeen, where I now live, back in 2000 and where are we now, 25, 2014. And at that point, it was more an investment than a conscious decision to build a business. If you can think back to 2014, interest rates were very low. People weren't really getting any great return on their savings. So at that point, it was really just an alternate asset class for me to kind of hold some wealth. So I bought this flat in Aberdeen. Um, Interestingly enough, you mentioned we met at some property education. I hadn't got any education at that point in property. And looking back with the knowledge I have now in 2025 to some of the decisions I made back in 2014, it was like, what were you doing? You know? So as an example, I bought my first flat. I bought it in my own name and I bought it outright, cash, no mortgage. So I sunk an awful lot of money into this property, which, were it not for the fact that I've subsequently built a property portfolio and I could have used that cash in a much wiser and smarter way, I suppose wasn't too bad. But you're a product of your knowledge at any given point in time, and that was the extent of my knowledge back then. So I managed it myself. The Aberdeen rental market was pretty buoyant back then, did quite well, and I thought this is quite good. I think I'll buy another. And to cut a long story short, I've been building my portfolio ever since, and I love it. I've gone from a very very corporate world where you thought you were quite a big cog in the machine, but actually you really weren't. But you were just a cog in a big machine, to one where it's my business. I make the decisions. I hopefully get more right than I get wrong. But it's a totally different feeling, a totally different vibe, and it's something. Looking back on it now, I wish I'd done a long, long time ago.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word fulfillment. You had a lack of fulfillment, and it sounds like this, doing what you're doing now, the property, the path that you're chosen, it sounds like it is giving you fulfillment.
It is. It absolutely is. And why is that? I think it's something to do with back to this cogs in machines and things like that. This is everything I do in my property business. I'm doing for myself and my family, and just that ability to build something, just by as a bit of context, because of what I did for 35 years, I've got an occupational pension. It gives me quite a reasonable income that me and my partner can live off quite happily. So the property business is about building for me. I don't take any money out of it, nor do I ever intend to. Um, but it enables me to build something that I know my kids will inherit. And that gives me quite a buzz. And hopefully at some point they will come. My son is quite involved in the business now, although he's got a full-time job. He's getting more and more involved in the business, and I can see a point in the not too distant future where he'll probably give up his job and go full-time in property. So the ability to give him that opportunity is is far more fulfilling than me, using the money to go and buy a Ferrari or something like that. I'm not particularly materialistic anyway, so that sort of stuff doesn't turn me on in particular. But I'd far rather be in a position where I'm giving him and his sister the opportunity to grow in a business, and build something along with me. So that, yeah, when I use the word fulfillment, that's really what I'm getting at. It's been something that really, and it really drives me, and it gets me up in the morning. And like any business, and whether you're working in an office for a big organization, or whether you're working for yourself, there are good days and there are bad days, and there are days when you think, gee whiz, is it all worth it? But it's that underlying sense of fulfillment that drives me through the bad times, and also keeps me grounded, I guess, when things are in those few moments when things are going really well and there's not a heap of problems.
Yeah, do you know, I've wrote quite a lot of notes to unpick what you're saying. There's so many gems in there. So what I'm hearing is that you are really enjoying this paying forward from your own life experience, and you've got that really strong why. And we both know as if you're gonna have your own business, you're gonna do this entrepreneurial thing. The problems grow with you. You are gonna hit things, but if you've got that strong why and you're not just doing it for money, which you clearly aren't, then it helps you move through that, doesn't it? And you grow as a person as well.
Yeah, I think you do. I think what I've come to realize is that the bigger my business gets, then I can't do it all on my own.
Yeah.
So you need people around you to support you, to advise you, and you need to be comfortable kind of giving away bits of the business to, right, somebody working on this. I know them, I trust them. I'm just going to let them get on with it. And I won't necessarily. When I first started off, I needed to know everything about everything that was going on. But I'm far more relaxed these days with not knowing everything that's going on. Frankly, I don't have the capacity to get into everything. So you've got to allow people, and the key to that is having good people and people that you have got faith in and you trust. And I've got those people around me now that really can help me. So I've anything in the past that's maybe diluted my drive because I've just spread myself so thin, and everywhere I look, there's a problem. I've still got problems. The magnitude of the problems are probably a bit different than they were back then, but it's having that team of people around you that can support you, that just helps me to continue moving forward every day.
Is it? And also, you mentioned you're 65, or I'm 56, opposite way around. And what I'm noticing is, over well, I've kind of lived in two worlds. This time last year, and I was in a corporate job, and now I'm not. And I've been dancing this entrepreneurial journey for 6 years now. And I had a hairdressing salon when I was younger, and I can see the differences. But what I noticed was when I gave up a job that was really well paid in 2021, and I went off traveling and I set up my own coaching business. And then I got scared and I went back into the corporate world. And then I did the same last year, but I'm not scared this time. There's a difference in where I am. But what I noticed that last time I went off traveling, I went to Mexico and I came back. And when I'd had this whole experience where I'd kind of found myself, and I was thinking I was just getting going and life was getting really exciting. And then when I went back into the corporate world, I came across so many people who were their whole story was working my way to retirement, working my way to retirement. And here I am now meeting many, many people who are 50 plus, who are just getting started, who are enjoying
Yeah.
life, who are experimenting. And it's just I guess what I'm trying to say is I can see the excitement in you. It doesn't have to be just sat in front of the TV with a remote control. As you get older, you can ignite that spark and really get into something if it's something that means something to you.
For sure, for sure. And that last point you just made there is the key to it. It's got to mean something to you. Um, but yeah, I kept myself. So I had a little story about retirement. I had two goes at it actually. Well, I was in the fortunate but and unfortunate position, or back in 2012. I mentioned that we'd been in Trinidad and Tobago working, and we came back from Trinidad in 2010. And just at that point, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. She had cervical cancer. And cut a long story short, she had this horrendous 3-year journey of, yeah, we're on top of it. Oh, it's come back. Yeah, we're on top of it again. And eventually it came back and it was metastatic and she passed away. And I had this kind of fairly senior job that was pretty demanding, and I was spending a lot of time at work. And although I live in Aberdeen, I don't come from Aberdeen. I'm from Edinburgh, which is 2.5 hours away. So I don't have any kind of family support around me. And the key to that was that my kids were 14 and 10 at the time. So, life was going to work, working 10 to 12 hours a day and at the job, coming home, cooking, cleaning, doing everything that a mum and dad would do combined, and also trying to support two kids that had lost their mum at an early age. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. And I thought my life is not going to be like this for the next few years. So, although I didn't feel particularly fortunate at the time, I was in the fortunate position financially because I was 52 at that point, so I didn't have access to my pension until I was 55. But I was in the fortunate financial position that I could say, look, I'm just going to call it a day here because the quality of my life and the support for my kids is far more important than anything I can do at work. So I did that, and it was a classic case. And the reason I'm saying this is because I see it so many times. People retire from their jobs with no idea whatsoever what they're going to do, yeah, in their retirement. And guess what? They get bored, they get fed up, oh, we'll maybe just have a wee drink, and or something like that, and then they become raging alcoholics and things like that. So I was kind of in that position where I knew what I didn't want to do, and I was saved, if that's the right word, but from a friend of mine who runs an oil and gas training company in Aberdeen. And the stuff he trains people in it was more sort of commercial stuff rather than technical nuts and bolts of the oil industry. So Drew was his name, and he got in touch with me and he said, could I help him out? Just he was a entrepreneur, single business owner, delivered training to people all over the world. He had a really, really interesting business. And he said, could I come in and help him talk about strategy and think about strategy and where he was going to take the his business in the future? So I said, yeah, absolutely. This sounds right up my street. So we agreed a 6-week scope of work for me to go in and help Drew to do that. And we met and I had to think about it and produced a report for him and what have you. And then we had one of these chance conversations over a cup of coffee. And I said, you do realize, Drew, that the biggest impediment to the growth of your business is you. And he kind of he gave me a wry smile because he kind of knew what I meant. And this is a trap that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into. They're so down in the weeds of what's going on in the business that they don't have time to lift their heads up, look over the parapet, and see the big wide world that they need to expand their business into, and go out and do the stuff that they need to do to expand that. So I made these points to Drew, and he said, yeah, you're right enough. And at that point, it wasn't a job creation scheme. You get a lot of these management consultants come along and in the corporate world and tell you what you already know and try and create jobs out of it and stuff like that. I wasn't doing that. It was just a genuine observation. But anyway, cut a long story short, Drew got in touch with me a few weeks later and said, I've been thinking about what you said, and would you like to come in, and help out a bit? And I said, well, yeah, I'd love to, because I was bored, quite honestly. And I said, love to, but a few conditions here. I don't want to. I've just come from a busy job, and I don't want to go back into one. So we agreed it would be part-time-ish, and I ended up doing that for about 18 months, until the oil price crashed. And then that's the sort of non-technical training is the first thing that companies take the red pen to when they're paring back budgets and when oil price crashes. So I ended up saying to Drew, well, I was only here for 6 weeks to start off with. I've been here 18 months. I'm quite happy to go. Because at that point I'd seen what was coming, and at this point I'd planned my retirement.
Yeah.
So I knew what I was going to do. And I did some voluntary stuff. I ended up doing training as a counselor with Childline. I worked with people that had dementia and things like that. So I guess, sorry, that was a bit of a rant, I know, but it's about we started off talking about people working towards retirement, and spending the last 10 years in a job in an organization, and oh my God, ticking off the days until they retire. Which is a pretty desperate place to be in the first place if your job is so unfulfilling that that's how you think about it. But it's there's a lesson there about planning for what you're going to do with all this time. And I see so many people who don't, and then they do end up sitting around watching Countdown or whatever in the afternoon on the telly.
Oh, I mean, gosh, I'm thinking about what that's brought for me is I'm thinking about how blind I was. And I've said this on this podcast before. I was really wealthy and I didn't know I was wealthy. I was scared of money when I first I left my husband and changed my whole life up. And when I first left, I was really had a good amount of money and I was scared to spend it. I was so blind. And then I hit a lot of adversity over the next 6 years. And I needed to because it opened up my world and it helped me see things. And then I went on this education. I learned about what I could do with my pension. I learned about all the different aspects and different things I had. And what it did for me was it opened me up to possibilities that I just didn't even know were possible. And that sent me on a journey, and amongst other things, where I've now got 5 businesses all in startup mode that are starting to actualize. But if you'd have asked me even 5 years ago, was that possible? I'd have kind of thought, well, maybe, but not in the way that it's happened. I wouldn't have realized I had resources back then
Mhm.
when I actually
Yeah.
did. And it like that takes me to adversity. Often it's the adversity I find that helps you find a way. And I know I'm so sad to hear about your wife, but that adversity as it kind of catapulted you. You mentioned your children, how important your children are to you, got you investigating different things and has made you look at life in a different way, hasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly has. It certainly has. And I was determined. Um, I was determined that neither me nor my kids should become victims of what happened to us.
Yeah.
Because it can do. And some people, that sense of what happens to them when somebody passes away, is overwhelming, and I get that. But my personality traits are such that I was determined that I wasn't going to become a victim. This is something that happened in our life that we wished hadn't happened, and but we're going to be resilient, and life goes on. My daughter was 10 years old. Her life can't come to a halt at 10 years old. We've got to, pick our way through this. And we have, both, both as a family, and I firmly believe that the drive that I've got for my business now, is certainly impacted by the resilience and just the feeling of this is not going to define me as a person or us as a family. And now, we moved on. The kids have done great. When I think of I guess the potential for the kids to have maybe kind of gone off the rails a little bit because of what happened to them, so proud of what they've achieved. I've got a new partner now. We've been together for a while. So it's and it just, yeah, it's a bit of a stereotype, I suppose, but you know that you just not allowing setbacks, no matter how big that setback is, to define you for the rest of your life. And it's energized me in some respects to do what I do now.
I'm a great believer in it's the way you look at things. Um, I've spent, I mean, obviously, to respect the feelings that you've got, I think that's really important to you move through the grief and everything. But I'm just the way we can flip the way we look at things, can't we? We can, you know, choose that our internal environment is key, I believe. How we choose, because sometimes I think to myself, in the last 6 years, there have been some really, really tough times for me, but they've defined me and who I am now, and they've given
Yeah.
me qualities to be a leader. And I'm now in a position where I'm required to be a leader more and more. And without all those things, I don't think I would be the person that I am. And a lot of it's been, I've said to myself, oh my goodness, this is happening anyway. I've got no choice. This is happening anyway. Then how am I going to look at this? How am I going to get through of it? And then I got to the point where I started to say, this is a growth spurt. I mean,
Yeah.
or things like I'd say to myself, what will you believe in God's source or whatever you believe in? I'd say, oh well, this is God training me. This is my training ground. This is me up leveling, and I'd start to look at things in a different way. I'm going to be happy no matter what's happening. I'm going to choose to look at this in a certain way no matter what's happening. And that's really stood me in a lot of good
Yeah.
stead, especially for being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. 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 It's I don't know what percentage I would attribute to it, you know, but it's I- running your own business is I'd say 75% mindset
Yeah.
and 25%, just getting your sleeves rolled up and getting into stuff. But if you don't have that mindset, that belief, then you're gonna let the disappointments
Mm.
overwhelm you. Whereas they're just bumps in the road. And equally, yeah, when things are going well, you kind of know that there's another problem around the corner, so there's no point getting overly excited. It's about being resilient and just operating on an even keel, I suppose,
Yeah,
is what
I
I
agree.
probably try and do.
My son's got a landscape gardening business, and he always he's very wise. He's 27, and he always says to me, "Equilibrium, mum. Don't get excited
Hmm.
about the excited. Don't get too low about the low." And also recently, I came across. I mean, him and I started watching the same person and learning from the same person. We both resonated. It was nice to have with your child to share that actually. And this guy talks about thinking from the solution, not
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
same
yeah.
mindset again.
Yeah, a little anecdote. I'm a big football fan, like big football fan, and the club that I follow from Edinburgh. I'm a Hibs supporter from Edinburgh, and Hibs had a terrible start to the season that's just finished. Like terrible. They were bottom of the league come November, and they just appointed a new manager, and it helped. The fact was that the guy was a bit of he played for the club. He was a bit of a club legend. But what I really admired about him was his um, he was very calm about the whole thing. I mean, the football world is real hire and fire type environment, but he totally calm all the way through. And of course, he's getting interviewed after every game, and they lost another game and lost another game. Very, very calm. And then they picked up from the end of November. They picked up and they had a really good season from then on. But the manager's demeanor just never changed. He was, you talk about equilibrium. He was just the same all the way through it. He said, we go through the same processes, that we would know the panic button doesn't get hit or anything like that. We trust the process. We know that we're doing the right things. We're just getting the wrong outcomes. But it'll change. And so there's a moral there, I think, for anyone in business. You pitch up every day and do the right things, then sometimes you won't see the results. Sometimes you won't see them immediately, but then you'll get this kind of almost disproportionate progress. And there's a great book, I've forgotten who wrote it, apologies, but there's a really good book called The Compound Effect. And it's about just, again, the cumulative effect of doing the right thing every day really builds up and delivers results for people. And I try and keep that at the back of my mind all the time.
Absolutely. And it's being willing to go in them trenches and do that kind of grind when you're not seeing the results. But then all of a sudden, I used to have I'm really fortunate because I've had jobs that I've enjoyed. Really, really fortunate. And I had this job for 15 years, which was commission only. People used to think it was a risk, but it wasn't. And what I noticed in that job was my sales would plateau and I just keep going and going. And suddenly they'd go up. They wouldn't gradually go up.
Yeah,
Suddenly
yeah.
go up, and then the
Hmm.
next level, and then the next level in that job.
And
And
you probably weren't doing anything different.
no, it was just that consistent,
Yeah,
consistent, consistent every single day. There's another book called Atomic Habits as well that's similar. That well worth. My son bangs on about that as well.
yeah,
Um, the other thing as well is when my sons first set out. I mean, I had that job and I was really successful at it, and I had one particular customer, um, and he's really, really successful. I worked in the dental industry, and when my son first set out with his own business, I put him in touch with him because he was just so successful. And it's like if you get yourself around people that are where you want to be, that's the best advice you can get, isn't it?
yeah,
Advice from
yeah.
people who are already there. And he said to my son, actually, for the type of business my son's got, and I don't believe this for every business, but he said, get your head down, work really hard for 5 years. Sometimes you're just going to feel like you can't even carry on because you're working so hard. But he said, if you can do that, you'll never have to work another day in your life. It's the type of business my son's got, and that's what happened to him. And then I remember thinking, I mean, he's my good friend to this day. I remember thinking, I did that. I got my head down. I worked just as hard as you, and but I did it for somebody else, and that was
Hmm.
the difference. That was the difference. If I'd done it, if I'd carried on with my own business back when I was in my 20s, and I just back then I couldn't see myself through all those, the difficult times. I wouldn't have had to work another day in my life.
Yeah,
But it's so true, isn't it? You just,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, picking up on a couple of points you made there, I think the role of a mentor can't be understated for people. I think, and people often don't realize that even the most successful people in the world, and you think, well, how could they possibly need to be helped? But they have mentors. Tiger Woods in his heyday had somebody that he worked with. It's a guy that was winning Masters major tournaments all over the place. He had so the role of a mentor is is really really important. I think for people. And then I guess the other point you made there about who you this is a difficult one sometimes. The who you associate with will often define what you go on and achieve. Now that's that doesn't play well with a lot of people, and sometimes I have a wee bit of difficulty with it myself because I've got mates that I went to school. I don't haven't kept in touch with an awful lot of them, but I've got guys that I've known for 50 plus years, and they've all achieved different levels of things in their life, but they're still my mates, and I still see them. But I think in a business term, in a business sense, then the people that you hang around with and associate with off has a real defining impact on what you'll achieve. There's a saying, I'll paraphrase it because I probably get it wrong, but there's a saying about, if you find yourself in a room and you're the smartest, best looking, most knowledgeable, hardworking person, then you're in the wrong room. If you can associate yourself with people who are maybe, ahead of you in terms of what you've achieved, then there's a pull-up effect that goes with that. Both in terms of what you learn from them and also you just, you want to get to, if you've got any sort of ambition at all, you want to get to those levels. So I would encourage people sometimes to have a think about who they hang around with and who they associate with, because that does have an impact on what you achieve in life.
agreed. A few things that came up for me then. The mentors, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am a mentor. in one of my businesses, but I will always have a mentor. In fact, at the moment, I've got three at the moment. And
Yeah.
what I realized really quickly at one point is I had a mentor and he helped me and he didn't help me at the same time. So what I was doing is I wasn't looking at him as he was good at this but not good at that, and I was taking advice. He was successful in one area of his life but not in another area of his life, and where he was successful was incredible, and I would employ him as a mentor in that area every day, but he tried to mentor me in an area that he was unsuccessful, and that I want. So I started to realize at that point, only go to the person who has achieved that very thing and has
Yeah. Yeah.
that path. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same mentor because there's different areas of life. And then when you said about associating with people, a couple of things came up for me there. I had a period in my life not too distance ago where I was trying to achieve something. There was no one in my life like that. And the only way I could surround myself with those types of people was online through digital means or listening to
Hmm.
YouTube, or there's always a way, isn't there? And then
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
regards to friends, same as you, I've grappled with that. There have been people who've dropped out of my life because they just don't resonate with me anymore. We don't vibe, we don't have anything in common. But what I've realized now is if someone's quick to give me advice on my path and they haven't walked that path themselves, I'm just really discerning who I listen to and who
Hmm.
to take
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. 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 Oh,
Yeah.
I get bombarded with advice daily. Some of it I take, some of it I don't.
Yeah, that's true. Do you know something? It's been really great chatting with you. There's lots of gems in there, lots and lots of gems that people can take. I'm sure, like I run this through software where we get lots of little shorts. There's going to be loads. I can't wait to see
Oh,
it.
right, right. Okay,
I
okay.
can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see it from this podcast. So I always ask two questions at the end, which I'm going to ask you. And the first one is, if you could go back to any point in your life and you like had a magic wand and you could go and talk to yourself from the future and say, hey, I'm just going to give you some encouragement, and this is what I want to let you know. What point of your life would you go to and what would you say?
Um, I think I would go back to my early 20s. So the bit I skimmed over and talking about, I was, although I had a good career, I was quite late in getting to a career. And in my early 20s, looking back on it now, I wasted 6, 7 years of my life. I had a great time, but and there's an argument to say that maybe it's made me the person that I am. But if I could rewind now, there's a lot I would have done different back in my early 20s. More around just realizing that life wasn't just all about, going out and playing football and all that sort of stuff. If I'd have knuckled down a bit earlier in my career, I think that would have helped me no end. But at the end of the day, I kind of got there. But you always ask yourself, could I have got further? So that's probably the part of my life that I would go back to.
So knowing what you were like then, because there probably was merit in you enjoying yourself, knowing what you were like then, because I'm going to go back to my son again. He's come up in this conversation. He didn't get going till he was 26, really. And it's
Hmm. Hmm.
perfect. He had all that period of getting to know himself that has been perfect
Yeah.
for then. So knowing what you were like back then, what would you actually say?
Um, this is getting broadcast, right? Yeah, I'll have to. I'll modify my language. Um, I would say, in fact, let me please pause that a second because my son is also 27 years old. And he works. This is his choice, nothing to do with me. He also works for an oil company, and he also works in finance. He did very well. Went to one of the local universities here, got a finance degree. But in order to progress a career in finance in the corporate world, you need a professional accountancy qualification.
Mm.
And I've been trying to um, persuade, influence, I don't know the right word, Kieran, my son, that he needs to think about that and doing that. And the last thing I want is for him to get to age 40 when it's too late to do anything about that and think, "Oh, I wish I'd done that
Oh,
15 years ago.
now we've opened up a whole other
I
conversation.
wish I'd done that 15 years ago." And, you know, I that's kind of what I would say to my 20-year-old self as well. Don't be that person that looks back on life and say, I wish I'd done that.
You're not that person because do you know, now this is really interesting because you're not that person because this is a, you're 65-year-old, you're living your truth, you're fulfilled. And it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's a fine line. You want your kids, you want the best for your kids.
Yeah,
How, how do you actually, all you can do is set an example of what fulfillment looks like.
yeah, no, yeah, for sure, for sure. A pal of mine's got a great expression. He says, as your kids get older, you move, depending on your parenting style, I suppose, but as your kids get older, you move from being the CEO of your children to the chairman of your children. And what on earth does that mean? Well, the CEO, when they're young, tidy your bedroom, do those dishes, do that, do this, do that. The CEO issuing instructions. Whereas when you move to the chairman, it's have you thought about this, or how would it be if this was to happen? That's all you can do because I mean they're grown adults.
Lives, isn't it? And yeah, gosh, that's a really good point. I just reached a conclusion. My children are 27 and 24, and I've got a grandchild as well. And both of them took unconventional paths. Both of them tried the conventional. I mean, they've got a hippie mum, right? But they both took unconventional paths. And I just reached this point. I found the hardest stage of parenting for me was the early 20s. And
Mhm.
I reached this point where I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to set this example of what it looks like to live your own truth.
Yeah,
And all
yeah,
I can do then is be the light and let them be individual and let them, if as long as they're individual and they're following their own truth, I'm happy.
yeah.
And do you know what I'm happy to say? That's exactly what they're both doing.
No,
And
that's great. Hmm.
both of them have got such different lives, they're trotting such different paths that are unconventional. And they do make choices that I think, oh my gosh, one of them's been on my podcast, one of them's coming on my podcast actually. But they seem to be finding their way in that truth, which looks so different to anything that I would ever have chosen for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely, absolutely. And it's great to hear. Great to hear. But I'm a huge believer in people find their own motivation eventually. It
Yeah.
might take some people longer than others. Took me till I was 28, really, to really establish what I was going to do and go for it. But people find their own motivation at different points of their lives, and provided the motivation that they do find is something that's fulfilling them and
Yeah.
it's not harming anyone else, then who is anyone to judge
Anyone to.
about it? For some people, some people are determined that their kids will climb up the corporate ladder and be the CEO of a FTSE 100 company and stuff like that. But that's defining living their child's life through their own values and their own views. At the end of the day, people have to be comfortable in their own skin, enjoy what they're doing. Material things are important to some people, not to others. And who is anyone to judge about that?
True. I mean, I built a life that was very materialistic and I enjoyed it. I must admit, I enjoyed it. But then I turned around one day and went, oh, this is not fulfilling me anymore. And now my life looks completely different to that. And
Yeah.
I've enjoyed both. I've enjoyed both worlds. It's been good. Okay, so my last question is if you could only pay one thing forward to the people listening to it, bearing in mind I told you the type of person that would listen, um, if you could pay one message forward, just one thing, piece of gold, what would you say?
Um, Live your dream.
Mm,
Live your dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it feels right to you, you want to do it that badly, then provided it's not harming anyone else, just go do it. Live your dream because you'll get as much fulfillment out of that. You'll get for it. You'll get more fulfillment out of that than you will do doing what you think other people think is the right thing to do. You might earn more money. You might, the things might come to you as a result of doing that. But it's getting it's the fulfillment that comes with doing something that you've got a burning desire inside you to do. There's no there's no substitute for that. So, if you're thinking about doing something, you want to do it, do your research, do your due diligence, make sure it is the right thing to do. But if you have that burning desire inside you to do it, then just go do it.
Somebody once said to me, if not now, when? And
Yeah,
I think when you were saying that, because my podcast is designed to ignite that in people, and often it's really scary. Like I wanted to write a book, and I had a mentor at the time, and she's, if not now, Joanne, when?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. More people regret the things that they didn't do in life than regret the things that they did do. Because even if you did something you got it wrong, then you've learned from it. But this, I wish I'd done, don't on your deathbed, don't sit and just recount all the things that you wish you'd done. Just go do them.
And the
And
thing is that every single thing that I did, I don't have that regret. My daughter, she does something called shamanism. It's spiritual, and she did this process with me where you go to your deathbed and see if you have any regrets. And I don't, because I have kind of thrown myself off the cliff so many times. And I mean, I'm just that type of person, but everything that I've ever done that's felt really scary, that I've been really scared to do, I've been so thankful that I've done it afterwards. And
mhm,
it's been scary, but it's never been as scary as I thought it was going to be.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Live your dream. Brilliant. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for coming on my podcast.
No, great. No, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. We could have chatted for hours.
Yeah, I think we could, couldn't we? It's been really good having you on here. Thank you.